we've been talking about 400,000 people over the next few years, and we have not done enough for it. There are not nearly enough risk management programs, and those mostly feed the carrier side. I mean, I wrote a book about this in 2018, and we're still fighting it. So I think the biggest problem is we just have not invested in talent the way that we need to, which means we keep fighting with each other over experienced talent.
Yeah, totally agree. I think everybody wants the plug and play candidates. And I was looking at your questions ahead of time and I made a couple of notes of, to me, what I think are the everyday things I'm bumping into. And I kind of jotted down four main things. One, people are aging out and they're not coming in at the same rate. Two, companies, when I say companies, I say the retail brokers in particular are not great at training. They don't have good structure in place to do it. They're not super interested in doing it. They'd rather pool someone who's, again, plug and play candidate versus training. So all fighting over the same people, as Tony mentioned. Third, I think that the younger up and comers want more flexibility, but I think the folks doing the hiring are more typically older and more old fashioned in their thinking. So it's kind of this, clashing of worlds with what the people want and what the companies are willing to give that makes it hard to find fits in a lot of cases. And a lot of those roles, I think, particularly I do a lot of commercial account managers for retail brokers, and a lot of those roles typically are female. And many times that woman is wearing a lot of hats on the home front. And so they're especially craving more flexibility and more balance. And again, that goes back to kind of that struggle of like the home life, work life balance. A lot of companies not wanting to give that flexibility. So women are trying to kind of navigate, how do I have a successful career and how do I also, keep everything rolling at home? And it's hard. People are busier, times have kind of changed. And I'm seeing that the companies who are more willing to give that flexibility do have an easier time picking up quality talent.
Absolutely.
Nikki, those are fantastic points. If I could add, I think it's super important. Number one, it's not just bringing in the new generation, it's keeping them, right? They won't stay unless they're learning, unless they're growing, unless they see a path to the future. And the account manager roles are super interesting because before COVID, we already had a demographic issue where account manager roles historically have been filled by high school educated women who stay forever, quote unquote, the girls. I wouldn't call them that. A lot of agencies call them that. That demographic is disappearing in the overall economy, right? We from when I graduated college in 06 to today, something like 55 to 60% of college degrees have gone to women. And today, the current class of college students today, there's two women for each guy, which means my brother in college is having a blast, but we're going to have a very hard time filling those account manager roles unless we change them in such a way that they become an attractive long-term career for a different type of women that we're used to having there, and hopefully bringing more diversity to that role.
Yeah.
But I agree with everything you said.
I think the challenge for when I talk to agency owners, folks on the smaller side of organizational growth, obviously have carriers out there with 10,000 employees. Most agencies in the U.S. are between 5 and 10. A lot of times they say, well, we just don't have the budget to bring in and teach somebody, the rules of the road, the ropes, if you will. Whereas perhaps on the carrier side, they've sort of built in that apprenticeship pathway where you can then, work your way, learn the industry, become licensed, and then maybe even eventually transition over to the agency. That really hits on how do we start reframing our thoughts on what makes a qualified candidate qualified. And so do you have any, initial thoughts when, as majority of the folks in our audience are agency owners, how can they start building that pathway to talent? And I think you both hit on the fact that the college pipeline is incredibly important. You have sort of mid career employees that are trying to juggle a bunch of competing priorities, both at the home front and at work. So how can we start easing that transition pathway and setting up many of these agency owners for success?
The one thing I think I would start with is, and it kind of is tying back to what you just said about budget on the prior comment. I mean, we don't have the budget for it. if you're hiring me and that we don't have the budget, that's all relative. So if you can bring in somebody at 40, 50K and train them versus stealing somebody who's 10 years in for 75K from another agency, like, aren't you, like, you're still paying, right? Time or money. And I think there can be a lot of loyalty if you are willing to train somebody and you take care of them and work on retention strategies. So, I kind of think you're going to pay either way. So, in terms of like what a qualified candidate looks like, I mean, I think it really depends on the specific scenario, on the role itself. I mean, I have situations where, like I have an agency client now, for example, who's recently in the last year brought on several pretty green candidates, people who are new to the industry or right out of college, and they have been super willing to train, but they have an opening now that a person's retiring, and that particular role, they need somebody who's very tenured, who can come in and deep coverage, not expertise, experience with large clients. So that particular role, like we have a higher budget and we know that we need somebody who's pretty seasoned for that role, but they do bend where it makes sense to on other roles to bring in, less experienced talent. I think in terms of like what you can train for and what you kind of innately have to have, to me, I think sales is the number one position where I feel like you kind of have it or you don't. If I talk to a candidate who's interested in producing, I go through like the weeds of like why that job is challenging. Are you comfortable cold calling? Because if you're not, like you're never going to be successful. And I talk about like how do you feel about, if I tell you that your first month on the job, you're going to go to a networking event, a chamber event, let's say with a pocket full of business cards and a room full of strangers, does that make you energized and excited or like want to run screaming? And if the latter, you're probably not a good fit for a producer. But if somebody is comfortable with those things they have to do, and they have that go-getter personality, and they're comfortable putting themselves out there, those people can be trained all day long. Whether that's a recent college grad with those skills, or maybe somebody who's 5, 10 years into the business who's selling, pick your whatever, copiers, payroll, office furniture, whatever. And I think it's all about just projecting the opportunity in insurance of recurring revenue, building a book, all that kind of stuff. So to me, sales, you kind of have it or you don't. And there are different, skills that you can discuss with the candidate, different assessments. I know some companies like to use that can kind of flesh out that. But the other roles, I think, account management, underwriting, any of those roles that have some level of customer service component to it, you do need somebody who has the people skills and the drive to deliver quality service to a client, well, whoever that client is, the agent or the end user or whatever. But outside of that, I think the meat of like the knowledge, the systems, all that can be trained. And I think too often companies miss out on a great candidate that has all those things, but just hasn't worked in that particular role or in that particular space before. So I think it's, for me, I'm always looking first and foremost at personality, aptitude, drive. Do they seem like the person who can be successful? And if they can, let's, talk about it and see if we can train them on the rest of it.
Well, on the account manager side, what can we do to take the crap work off of their desk? So anything that can be automated away, anything that can be outsourced away, anything that doesn't require a license, basically. The more that we take that off, this is Kelly Donahue Piro from Agency Performance Partners, that is the one that got me to believe in this. The more that we can take that stuff off, the more that it becomes a better job, and the better we can pay them also, because we'll need less of them. So you can make it a better career. I would also say start partnering with your local community college. There's really no reason that account managers need a 4-year degree. Partner with your local community college to help with that.
It sounds like you both fall very firmly on the fence of you don't necessarily want to hire for skill. However, obviously there are those positions where you need that to be successful. You want to hire for attitude and aptitude and willingness to learn. How can organizations set themselves up to take advantage of that willingness to learn through mentorship programs, through apprenticeship programs? Have there been creative things that either one of you have seen that have really, helped that busy agency owner have a more experienced staff member mentor that new hire? anything on that regard that you can share to help set our attendees up for success?
Um, I mean, I think one miss that I have one agency who does a good job with this, but I think it's a miss for a lot of agencies is you've got somebody who's got this monster book of business. They've been super successful in selling, not handed a book, but they've actually built it. And so they've obviously got what it takes. They've got those skills, they've got those connections, and they've let you know, hey, in 2 years, I'm going to retire. And the agencies just let them sail into the sunset, hand that book to somebody else. To me, why not consider that person in some sort of like a 1099 or a part-time basis? Maybe toward the end of that time they want to retire, or even offer them, hey, 2 years after in a part-time capacity or whatever. Let them be a trainer, a mentor to some of the younger ones coming in. Help them with closing an appointment with a lead, or help them go out on an appointment and talk the talk when they're not quite comfortable with all the weeds of the coverage knowledge. Or maybe it's an appointment with a large company CFO. It's going to be hard for somebody who's 23 years old and brand new to insurance to hold court in that room. So let the guy who's 65 and really knows his stuff and is super comfortable tag team. I mean, some of the best experiences I had learning was shadowing people who were senior to me when I was a new producer, and just going out with them, hearing how they talk, seeing how they handled certain situations. I think that there's so much talent aging out, and those folks typically, they may not want to do the full-time grind for another year or two, but they're typically pretty open and interested in some sort of part-time work. A lot of them are going to go volunteer at their local nonprofit, or get a part-time job doing something. Like, why not let them have this be that part-time job? I think that can work really, really well.
On the producer side, mentoring programs that are well structured, by well structured, the biggest thing is, especially if it's a mid-career producer, not a leaving producer. If it's a mid-career producer, you have to align the incentives so that it makes sense financially for them to help the young producer. On the account manager side, interestingly, I haven't seen any great internship or mentoring programs. It's basically hire who's already there, or hire and train, and then do your best to retain.
Well, I think the challenge with that, Tony, I totally agree. And I think the challenge there sometimes, I don't know that I have a great solution, is if you're not interested in sales, what is the path forward for an AM? I mean, a larger agency has probably that AE type structure where there's, I call it a producer without a sales goal, right? They're kind of managing a book, they're the front lines, there may or may not be a producer attached to it, depending how the agency structures it. But if they don't want to sell, there's really not a whole lot they can do outside of becoming like a senior account manager and elevating themselves compensation wise. Certainly a larger agency may have some sort of like a manager of the service people position. But yeah, in terms of mentorship, it's more like a senior level and learning and maybe working on larger accounts, having a deeper coverage knowledge, more designations. But what is the real path forward there? Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot, and some people kind of, I think, are okay with that. They don't want to be in sales. They're happy with their I'm done at 4:30 type job. So for the right person, it's totally fine. But yeah, I would agree. I've not seen a whole lot of mentorship on the AM side either.
So, both having been in producer type roles, you've seen a shift with the generations, and now we're at this really mysterious Gen Z, which is, for a sort of baby boomer or even Gen X agency owner, can be a really hard demographic to get their heads around, especially as sort of work-life balance and remote versus on-site, those sort of priorities have shifted with the generations. How can, or what are some ways that an agency owner, a younger person at a carrier trying to hire new staff, new talent, can actually attract that demographic into the industry rather than just waiting for people to fall in by happenstance?
Tony?
With Gen Z, it's very different than with millennials. With millennials, it's all about the mission. With Gen Z, it's all about the safety. It's all about the history. But now the safety, it's not the safety of we've been here for 50 years, 75 years, we've never had a layoff. It's more the safety of with an insurance skill set, you'll always be able to find a good job. regardless of what happens here. It's a generation that grew up in panic and is in panic mode to find some stability. Very different from the millennial generation.
Yeah, I think it is interesting the willingness to make a change that you see within the generations. I mean, I can remember when I left my first insurance carrier to go to another one, my parents were like, this was like 2010. My parents were in shock. I was like 3 years out of school, and they're like, "You're doing what? You're leaving a good job to go somewhere else?" Like that generation just didn't do that. And the younger you get, the more open-minded people are to it. And they don't have pensions typically, so there's a lot of incentive. There isn't a lot of incentive to stay just for the stability of it. So, I mean, in terms of like where to find people, I kind of had, jotted down three things in my mind. One would be have a good social media presence. The younger people are on social media. So if you can show it to what Tony said, like what your company is all about, what your mission is, what you support, you won't ever appeal to everyone, but your goal is to appeal to your people. So having that presence online, whether it's, and I would say LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, wherever it is that you're kind of targeting people, having a presence out there that they can kind of click with, relate to, and have kind of constantly in front of them is a big deal and a way to connect with them. The second would be, events where they are, whatever kind of industry networking events or different chamber events. A lot of younger people, particularly salespeople, new in the working world, are at those events. They probably don't even know what an insurance producer is. They might have fallen into sales by accident. They're selling office furniture or copiers, whatever. Introduce them to what this path can afford, because they just don't know what they don't know. And then the third one I would say is, if you have a trusted recruiting partner that's kind of in your, really tight relationship with that person that kind of understands what you're all about, who your sweet spot hire is. I mean, I have clients that I may only do 1 or 2 roles for them a year because they have very low turnover, but I know like very exactly what they look for in a hire. So if I see somebody who's a great fit for that company, I know that we have that kind of relationship that I can reach out to them and say, "Hey, I know you're not necessarily looking for a producer right now, but I met this young guy and he is phenomenal. He really impressed me. He's got this, and this." And they will, on my recommendation, talk to that person. I just had it happen last year. A young guy looking to make a change, a couple years into the working world. I have a client that I knew would love him, plugged him in. He's been there about a year now and he's crushing it. And they're so happy. So I think it's like having that open mind that you can't only wait for when you need someone, but you're open-minded that when the right person comes along, you're willing to try to make it fit.
Yeah, so a question then for you, Nikki. I think that was a really great launch pad for what I'm about to ask. As you have grown, in your role, both first as a producer, now with your recruiting company, how are there specific types of roles or even types of companies? It could be by agency size, it could be by product sold, that tend to lend better to a recruiting model versus direct hire.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of play in sort of a pretty niche space. I mean, I think that it really kind of comes down from, in my mind, not so much the type of position, but more so the bandwidth and knowledge that the person or company doing the hiring has for that role. So, for example, if the HR person is kind of the person that's tasked with this search, they're not going to have a foundation of knowledge necessarily of what makes a successful underwriter or what makes a successful producer, whereas someone like Tony and I would, because we've done these roles, we understand what it takes to be successful. So in those cases, I think absolutely lean on a recruiter, because they're going to save you. Maybe it's going to cost you some money, but it's also going to save you a ton of time. So what are you really spending there? I think also if, I have some agency clients that are, a really nice sweet spot for me has been the clients that are like 30 to 50 or so employees, because they're pretty nimble. They tend to have pretty progressive work practices, and I can deal with the decision makers versus like an HR person. And those guys are busy and they understand that there is value in someone like me on the front lines, pre-qualifying, so to speak, candidates. So they're not sifting through 20 different resumes and figuring out who to interview. Does this make sense or whatever? I'm bringing them 2 or 3 that are very qualified. And so for them, like the ability to just not have to deal with it because they are so busy, that frees them up in other ways. So yeah, I don't know if it's so much positions for me as much as it is like what their time and skill set is for who's doing the hiring.
Absolutely. Well, Tony, a question for you. I have absolutely loved the Insurance podcast. I absolutely love the Slack group. Shout out for that. It's really a gem. You've now spoken to hundreds of people throughout the industry, people starting companies at the ground floor, doing really cool, innovative things. How have all of those hundreds of guest interviews changed your perspective on hiring folks in insurance?
So it's been 570 some episodes over the last like 8 years. Profiles in Risk is the name of the podcast. It's on all the platforms or on the Insurance Nurse YouTube channel. I think the biggest change that I've seen is that I'm finding more and more people, and I'm getting calls from more and more people who are interested in the industry because they ran into an insurtech out in the wild, and they would have never thought of insurance, but the insurtechs make it look so cool that they're actually considering us now. So that's the biggest change that I've seen. Now, as of the last three to 4 years, yeah, since post-COVID, they are competing with us for talent. And they're hiring lots of talent that is experienced in insurance, and they are so much more remote friendly than the rest of the industry. So that is a whole new source of talent competition that is remote friendly, something to keep in mind, right? And there are plenty of insurtechs that hire account managers, for example, and they're remote friendly. So that's your competition out there. One thing that unrelated to hiring, but that I do think is important to say, the biggest change that I've seen in interviews we did 3 years ago to interviews we do today is that 3 or 4 years ago, most of them were talking about disintermediating the agency. And that's not the case anymore. But nowadays, I think everybody has realized the agents are not going anywhere. So now the focus of probably half of them is creating tools for the carrier space, and the other half is creating tools for the agency space. So if you're in the agency space and you haven't taken a good look at the technology available out there in the last couple of years, it's a good time to look, because there are just tons and tons of options. There's even a couple of accelerators dedicated to bringing in agency side insurtechs. One of them is Broker Tech out of Iowa, and the other one is 101 Weston Labs out of North Carolina. So take a look at what's coming out of there, because those are funded by the agency space. They're choosing the tools that look to them that make sense.
Yeah. So just for the folks in the audience, we're going to be opening it up for Q&A here in a moment. So please go ahead and put in questions you have for our panelists in the chat, and I will try and collate and adjudicate those. I just want to drill down on one final term that I've heard a few times, just for the folks that perhaps don't have a strong recruiting background, and that is a talent pipeline. So when you think of a talent pipeline and you think of that in the small business space, what does a really successful talent pipeline look like? And what does a not successful talent pipeline look like?
Go for it.
For a small business, it's hard. Let's be honest about that.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you meet enough people in the insurance space, right? If you're active in your local big I, don't just make friends with the other owners. Get to know their staffs, because when you need to grow, that's who you're stealing from, right? And the more that you can get involved in the local community colleges, as I said earlier, so that when you do have an opening, they know who you are and you've been visible in their college careers, it'll be much easier to bring them in. So how doing that before, basically digging your well before you need to drink.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think too, and it is tougher for smaller shops, but I'm surprised often how many agencies get themselves on a point where like one person leaving like takes the whole house down. If having one more person than you need means a little bit less profit, like doesn't that make it worth it to not have to risk a bunch of clients because they're pissed off about poor service because you're down one person, but that's like 30% of your service team with that one person. I mean, I have people all the time who are, guilt ridden, feeling terrible about taking a new job because they're worried about their colleagues are leaving behind, which it's unfortunate that that's a consideration for someone, but I hear it all the time. And so I think, an agency needs to look at, okay, well, if we take a little bit less, profit this year, but that money goes into paying for maybe one more person than we need, so people aren't so strapped, or one person leaving doesn't take the whole house of cards down. Like, I just think that's something that, so many are running just so lean unnecessarily. I don't get it sometimes.
Having slack in the system keeps your people from burning out. So it's
Yeah.
it's a double win.
Yeah.
And I think what you just touched on there is sort of the retaining of good employees. I mean, Tony, obviously, you're going to meet the coworkers potentially of your competitors, and if they're a good fit, then maybe they will move over if you have a better work culture. So just wanted to recap for our attendees. We heard some really excellent strategies. I just wanted to call them out. One was, participate in your local chamber of commerce events and find young people that have made a mark in another industry. I mean, I love the idea of people who sell copiers could actually be really great insurance producers, right? Because they're go-getters. Tony, you really hit on, make sure you're using the local resources, whether that's a community college, whether that's perhaps a 4-year university that has a sort of a risk management or, business hybrid programming. Just as we think about providing value for the folks that decided to jump on today, and we thank them for that. Any sort of other, low-hanging fruits really quickly, like when you're thinking about bullet points of, I need to hire in the next 3 months, perhaps, 1 year from now, any other sort of, venues you might want to be exploring or thinking about?
I mean, I would say just don't wait until it's urgent. Whatever you're going to do, like start, plan ahead. And I think, the retention Tony touched on earlier, that's such a big piece of it. I mean, a lot of companies have like, employee referral bonuses, but if you're not a really, really stellar place to work, I mean, I think about even when I was producing, like very rarely I could ask a client for a referral, but rarely were they going to just go out of their way to just give me one. And your employees are kind of the same. They're not just like waking up in the morning, like, oh, who can I come, refer to work here? But if you have this really strong employee referral bonus, that's probably less than paying a recruiter, right? That's the reality. But you're also a really phenomenal place to work. That does give people incentive to really kind of keep their ear to the ground when somebody's disgruntled or looking to make a change. Giving those perks to people that make them feel invested and valued really just goes such a long way. That lower turnover is really where it's at. And I think that my clients that have the lowest turnover are ones that are giving good flexibility, they're giving competitive compensation, they're adjusting that when they need to because they realize paying people a little bit more is better than losing them. Giving bonuses to service staff, every other Friday off, like creative things like that. Those are the kind of things that when I reach out to somebody and they say, hey, I really appreciate you, messaging me, or calling me, whatever, but I'm really happy where I'm at. Our agency president is such a great guy and he really takes care of us and he gives us this paternity leave and these other things. Like, I'm not interested in making the change, but I appreciate you reaching out. Like that to me, I sometimes even will tell that if I know the person, or I'll reach out and say, hey, like, great job. Your people are really happy. Like, kudos to you, because that's a testament to the environment they've created. I mean, people are typically far less likely to make a change if they really feel strongly invested in the team that they work with and the leadership they work with. So I think that the focus on retention is such a big piece of it. And then if you can tie into that some sort of a referral bonus too, to get new people in the door, that's great. But that retention really is key.
I agree with all of that. And I would add the biggest thing you can do to make it easy to find talent, and the biggest thing you can do to keep that talent other than paying them properly and treating them well, is flexibility. And when I mean flexibility, I mean if allowing the majority of them to be remote, basically allowing anybody who's not necessary. And the few agencies have lots of people walking in the door. If that is your agency, then you do need a couple people there. But if 95% of what the person is doing, and this is especially true in commercial lines, if 95% of what they're doing is not in person, just let them be remote. You're much more likely to keep them, much easier to find new ones when you do need them.
Excellent. Well, I just want to thank you both so much for taking time out of your schedules to be here today and join us for this webinar on recruiting and insurance. Really great information, and I hope that the folks in the audience walk away with at least one little nugget that they can take back to their organization and help improve their next hire. If they want to get a hold of you for any reason after this, what is your preferred way for them to reach out?
Email or LinkedIn is good for me.
Okay.
I always encourage everybody to add me on LinkedIn. I just put it on the chat. Even if you don't need any recruiting right now, that's perfectly fine. I post about insurance pretty much every day. By the way, Nikki does at least a couple times a week, and her stuff is really, really good also. So yeah, adding us on LinkedIn, I think it's the best way to see what's going on out there.
I'll put mine in the chat as well then. There we go.
Thank you both so much. Wonderful having you here. If anyone has any follow-up questions or loses those LinkedIn connections, I'm always happy to send those out by email. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close out the webinar. So thank you all so much for being here.
You guys. Thanks, Colby.
Thank you.